of what we've been working on the past year. So we focus on broadband deployment through our PUC grant to support the Connected Capital Area Broadband Consortium. And in this role, we support our jurisdictions, our anchor institutions, our internet service providers, and many other partners. And we do a whole range of things from project development to identifying priorities for meeting broadband infrastructure gaps for unserved and underserved areas, and assisting people with project readiness, looking at funding sources, helping people with applications, providing letters of support. So it's a pretty broad spectrum of trying to make sure that our communities can get connected. There's, as everybody knows, historic levels of funding coming into the state, and we want to make sure that our communities are ready for that range of opportunity. And internet connectivity and digital equity are very big priorities for the region. They're embedded in our state economic strategy. Valley Vision also manages and is the convener for the state's investment in the regions for California Jobs First. And so broadband infrastructure is a core foundation of a high quality of life, workforce readiness, and economic competitiveness and equity in our region. So all of this work supports what we're trying to achieve through the consortium. Through this work, we collaborate very closely with our local, state, and federal agencies and elected officials and leadership. We have fantastic leadership in the region that supports our communities. There are national and state leaders in this realm. And I want to thank today Aaron Jones from Congresswoman Matsui's office and Lucy Brazil from Congressman Thompson's office for all their support and leadership. We also have Amelia Perez and Rita Durgan from the state legislature, the assembly. Emilio is on the committee that oversees a lot of the legislation that goes through, and Rita works for Assemblymember Aguiar Curry, who was one of our first initial champions for broadband as mayor of Winters. Also, I want to acknowledge Marina McClatchy, who's here today from NTIA. She's our designated rep and will be assisting us in a lot of our grants and programs. And she's another fantastic resource. So, and then another thing that we do is generate a lot of resources and materials. You'll hear about some of those today. We prepared a business guide for helping business communities, including our farming communities, our ag. We've got some people here from farm bureaus who assisted us. We work with chambers of commerce and business property improvement districts and jurisdictions to identify what resources our businesses need, which is another effort that we really try to add value for, because a lot of the focus has been on households, of course, which is critically important, but we want to make sure our business community has the resources they need. And then I also want to thank all of our providers who are here today. You'll hear from several of them. They're going to also be highlighting some local projects. And one of the projects that came to fruition recently was through a partnership with the California Emerging Technology Fund and T-Mobile. 11 fairground administrative facilities across the state were connected, and that includes 2 in our region in Yolo County and Sutter Yuba County. So that's our job, is to try to bring more resources in to the community. We also have worked a lot on permitting. You're going to hear some really great resource information today. We have Roland Oak from Southern California Association of Governments, who's been leading a big effort to really help us with some models and tools. So in addition, we also do a lot of work in digital equity. We convene the Capital Region Coalition for Digital Inclusion on behalf of many community partners, including the city and county of Sacramento and the library. A couple of our core projects there have been helping Sacramento State University get an NTIA grant of $3 million, Connecting Minority Community Grant to help generate support to train students as digital navigators and work in our communities, to help people get online. It's important to have the infrastructure, but people need to be able to get access and know how to use the benefits of infrastructure. We've also worked so closely with Leah Tata Floyd Elementary School in Northwest Lamb Park And through a partnership with Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency, Julius Austin is our lead partner there. We've done a school to home project with California Emerging Technology Fund. AT&T just generously supported the community to get more than 130 laptops and work on digital literacy for families who reside in public housing in this community. And then we've been working closely with SHRA on a new model for radio Wi-Fi. So those are the kind of projects we've been working on. And now it is my pleasure to transition to the next part of our agenda. And I'd like to introduce and am honored to welcome Maria Ellis from the Public Utility Commission. She is the Deputy Director for Broadband, and Maria is going to give us an overview of the state's role in a lot of these funding and deployment initiatives. So I'd love to turn it over to you, Maria.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. Certainly, the consortia continues to be a really great partner for the work that we're doing here on closing the digital divide. So really happy to be here and provide a brief update on what's been happening and what we are hoping to see coming down the pike. And thank you so much for driving the slides. I really appreciate it. Next slide, please. I'm going to just give a quick, this presentation is not super long. I think it's like 11 slides total, but it's mostly just going to be a light touch on some of the programs that are available to us. But I also want to focus in a little bit on some of the impact that's been made through these programs already, and to highlight just how important it is to continue to get awards out, continue to get folks applying for these programs, so that we can get this funding into the community. This slide here is just many of you probably have seen this in other presentations. This is just a broad overview slide of some of our programs and last mile specific programs that we oversee here at the CPUC. And starting here with the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, otherwise known as BEAD. This is a federal program and administered by the NTIA, and we work very closely with Marina McClatchy, who is here. She is our FPO here. And so I'll talk more about that towards the end of the presentation, but this is around a $1.86 billion program for infrastructure and deployment of last mile service. And I'll talk about short story there is that we'll have a window opening next year for solicitation. I'll tell you more about it towards the end. And I'm making these slides are available for everyone. So if you want to look a little bit more. The next one is the California Advanced Services Fund. This is an umbrella that has 6 programs underneath it. I'm going to talk about those shortly in one moment. But one thing to highlight is this last year, we got an increase in spending authority up to $136 million across all those 6 programs. So that's wonderful because that's an increase that's doubled the amount of investment that we can put out. And this is an area where we really strongly partner and, with the consortia to help get applicants and seed some of our programs in this space. The Loan Loss Reserve Program is not a grant program. It's a financing tool for about $50 million. And we received applications for this earlier this year. And just recently, last week, in fact, the commission approved a resolution that awarded this financing tool in its completion, all $50 million, to applicants that an applicant had several applications into during the time frame when I think it was April when we cut off the application cycle. But that's great news. It went to GSA, Golden State Connect Authority. They're doing a lot of, as you probably are very aware, they're doing a lot of developing a lot of grant projects across the state in rural communities where this infrastructure is desperately needed. So we're glad to be able to support them in doing that work. And lastly, it's the federal funding account. And this is an almost $2 billion account that is a multi-year investment. So it's not, it was always imagined as a multi-year investment. So it's not like the state of California has $2 billion right now, but we are we're working with our current appropriation to make investments right now, and you'll see that we have been putting out recommendations for award roughly every 2 to 3 weeks, and the commission has been since July on every agenda approving awards in this fund, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So I wanted to dive deeper into the CASF, the California Advanced Services Fund, and the programs that are funded under this umbrella. Like I said, it was 6 different programs. One you can see here is the consortia account, and this is in millions. So this is what that 136, million dollars and how it's spread across all the different programs. But I'm going to start with the adoption account. And this is, a really important one in terms of what we're doing on digital equity, because it's not just about infrastructure, it's about helping people understand how to engage with the internet. If you, especially if you are coming from communities where you maybe have not had a lot of exposure, this is really, really important. I always joke that my mom is very much in this category. And if I could put my mom through one of these digital literacy tools, it would be very helpful to help her kind of understand how to engage on the internet safely, what tools to use, just things that if you didn't grow up with it, maybe you weren't exposed to, is super helpful. We talked about consortia, and then there's a line extension program. This is an interesting and unique program because it allows a single property owner to basically, it grants funding to help them extend the line. Let's say that on one side of the street, you're connected, but the provider for some reason didn't get to your side of the street or down your block. This is something that you could tap into to help you connect. And it doesn't have to be through an entity. It could be a single property owner could really apply for this, which is really unique. And then I think many of you are familiar with the infrastructure grant account. It funds a variety of infrastructure for deployment. So this is our oldest program in this category. And then moving on to the public housing account. This is also a really important program in terms of closing the digital divide. Not often we talk about deployment that gets to the entrance of a property, but when you're talking about MDUs, often it stops there. You're not getting the inside wiring that's necessary to provide good deployment for within the building to reach everyone. And so this is a program that works on generally any publicly subsidized housing or farm worker housing or communities that are particularly low income. This is helping to connect those communities in particularly in MDUs. And also one hallmark of this is that it provides free internet access for 5 years. So it's not just about access, it's about affordability. And that helps us really, again, reach those that really need this and have bigger hurdles to connect. The Tribal Technical Assistance Program is, it's the title, it funds the kinds of planning work and the foundational work that takes to develop a deployment project or infrastructure broadband network. So think about your engineering, your environmental review, your your needs assessment, all of those things that it takes to develop a meaningful project and a deployment. This is a tool that California tribes can use, and it's California, any tribe could apply for up to $250,000 per year. And this fund would help cover those costs of planning for that, which is wonderful because you can lay the foundation on some aspects of your work and come back next year and be funded again if you'd like to continue the project and the development. So next slide. I want to just highlight here some of the timelines for these programs. And so the line extension program accepts applications year-round anytime, and we'll consider them as they come in. And then the public housing adoption and tribal technical assistance, the next deadline, meaning you can submit your applications anytime, but the next deadline for applications is July 1st of next year. The infrastructure grant account has been, because we've been making so many awards through the federal funding account, and we wanted to take a pause to make sure that we can get through that award process and really let folks that might be interested in applying for grants understand what the environment might look like. We've been waiting on this one for a bit to help coordinate with some of our other programs. And so the infrastructure grant account, the broadband equity access and deployment, and the federal funding account, next windows of funding, so the next application cycles are to be determined, and we will certainly be communicating that with folks widely and often as we approach, to provide them plenty of time to be ready. One last thing just to say is that at the top here is that we've, as mentioned, we've been making recommendations from the staff perspective at CPUC on the federal funding account with regularity, with every 2 to 3 weeks. And we're going to continue that into likely into Q1 of 2025. Next. So I just want to kind of do some highlights. I'm not going to go over all of this, but I want to just highlight some of the work that's been done through these accounts, through these different programs. So this is part of the CSF's California Advanced Services Program. This is the adoption account. Since this account has been started, 46 million and grants have been made to 448 projects. And you could see that it's benefited almost 400,000 Californians. We received some applications here in this last July cycle. You could see them here, and some of them have been taken action on, some of them will be taken action on. But what I want to highlight down here is in this consortium region, 1.6 million in awards has been made to 15 projects and benefiting almost 6,000 Californians in our region here. Next. And same for the broadband public housing account. Overall, since the beginning of this account, it has awarded 17 million and almost 18 million in grants, over 500 projects. And so this does both connection and some training. And so you'll see here that it's connected over 24,000 households, not we call them units, but these are households, and provided training to over 32,000 residents. And in this region here, the consortium region, you'll see that we've done 33 projects and have impacted over 1,000 households and nearly 4,000 residents. Next. So infrastructure grant account is the deployment account. You'll see here since this is the oldest account under the CSF kind of portfolio or flag, umbrella, if you will. This was the OG of accounts. And so here you see that we've done, about $346 million in awards totally over the lifetime of a grant account since 2008, and 104 projects. And in this region, one project has gone forward, and we'd love to see more projects come forward into this consortia area, but it was the Digital Path project that received over $400,000 in 2021. Next. Trouble technical assistance. Again, so what's interesting, we'd love to see, we don't have any projects in this consortia region, and that could be for a variety of factors, but want to highlight here that one thing that's unique is that, so I mentioned that $250,000 annual limit, application limit per tribe. That was recently raised. So it used to be 150,000. And so now it's just been recently raised this year. And we're hopeful that we're going to get a higher uptick in this, continue to see a demand for this program. And it's not this one, the Tribal Technical Assistance Program is not that old. It's only a few years old, but it's already made 7 million in awards to 38 tribes and 73 projects across the state. And one from the time that we just recently awarded one in September to the Paskenta Band of Namlaki Indians. And I really apologize if I've done that not justice in the name. And then there's another project under review currently that we've received. Next. Okay, so that was the California Advanced Services Fund. I wanted to move on to the federal funding account and talk about what's been happening here. And for perspective, before I kind of dive into this, I want to share, like, this is a monumental program. It really highlights the leadership of both this administration in California and the legislature and being able to see this funding. And the beauty of this program is that across that $2 billion, every county is guaranteed some allocation of that $2 billion, and which guarantees in essence that every county will receive some investment from that pot. And it's just a hallmark, piece of legislation and investment by the state of California, and it's wonderful. And then the other thing is that, we looked at some of the projects that have been done through the CSF program since it started in 2008. And if you think about it, this program, it's running very quickly. And since it started issuing recommendations in June, with the first award being made in July, and so July through basically the end of this year, they will have made more awards in the 6 months and awarded in more projects and assessed more projects and awarded more projects in 6 months than the entirety of the California Advanced Services Fund Infrastructure Grant Account has done since 2008. So think about the monumental kind of lift that is to get these projects out the door, to make sure that these communities can continue to get connected. So I'm really excited about the level of work that's been done here and trying to deliver this as quickly as possible. And so kind of rolling up, this is as of November 7th. So, things are changing fast because, like I said, we're making recommendations every 2 to 3 weeks, and then the commission is voting on recommendations. So this could get stale soon, but as of November 7th, the commission has awarded over $800 million in grants benefiting 1.8 million Californians. And so in addition to that, we've got 24 million in grants that are outstanding in Yolo and Yuba County, in fact, in this consortium region. And then if you're looking at the combined recommended and awarded totals, you're at 829 million, almost 2 million Californians that are going to benefit from this work. And we're just in this particular region here, 7 to 7 million is either awarded or recommended to date. That would impact 82,000 residents in this area. Next. And then just diving a little bit deeper, we've got and it's great to see some of these projects on your agenda today, in fact. We've got the one project in Sacramento County that was awarded. That's going to deploy 55 miles of network. The other project that has already been awarded is in Sutter County, and that's also going to deploy roughly 55 miles of network. And you can see the impact here of these two projects in terms of their reach for these communities. And then there are 2 other counties where projects are recommended. It's in Yolo and Yuba County. And you can see that there's 2 projects each here that would deploy 125 miles of network, and the other one 245 miles of network. Next. Lastly, this is my last slide, and I want to just finish on BEAD. And one great thing to note is that in October, we received approval from the NTIA to basically approve the state's BEAD program, how we would do subgrantee selection. And this is really, really critical. This was something that we had been working towards for quite some time. And so getting that approved is really important. And the commission followed on by adopting that volume. And it is now part of how it lays the foundation for how we are going to administer and this program and do subgrantee selection. So that happened in October. And officially, I think we received the approval on October 3rd, which means that we have until October 2nd of 2025 to submit to NTIA and our partner here, Marina Online, our plan for what's called a final proposal. And the final proposal is mainly, it says you've gone through your solicitation process. You have selected proposed subgrantees, and you take all that and you roll it up into what's called a final proposal, and you submit that to NTIA for approval. And so while we have now approved our volume 2 subgrantee selection process, we also have now access to our California has been allocated its portion of the BEAD funding, which is that 1.86 billion. And we cannot make any awards from that until NTIA approves the final proposal. So you'll see that here at the end, towards the end of 2025. So once the NTIA approves our proposed list of subgrantees, then we can go ahead and make official enter into grant agreements, more or less, with the proposed grantees. One thing I want to note here is that there's a couple of contingencies. So we are going to wait till we get our map back from NTIA, which we hope to be by the end of the year. What that map will be is the final determination, if you will. That is our challenge process. Like, we've gone through our challenge process. That's a unique thing I want to highlight that is different from both the CASF Infrastructure Grant Account Program and the Federal Funding Account Program. In those two programs, applicants can submit applications, and then there's a formal objection period where others can object on either program that doesn't meet the program goals, or this is already served, or a variety of other factors. This is really different. NTIA turned that on its head and said, we're going to do a challenge process first. We think here's the general sphere of we think are BEAD eligible locations, and then people can challenge those locations up front. And then we went through what is called a model challenge process for 120 days. And we submit the result of that challenge process to NTIA for verification validation. And then once that is complete, we get back a map that NTIA says, yes, this is correct. You followed the process, and we're hoping to get that map back at the end of this year, which would help us understand what the field looks like for BEAD and what the eligible locations are across the state. And then we could do a subgrantee selection process after that. So things to note here is that, so likely, I can't give you any certainty on the date, but there's some moving parts here, but we know that we're aiming to have a subgrantee selection process kick off in Q1 next year. In the meantime, one of the things that we're preparing, and we're going to make sure that these are available to everyone, is we're starting to think about maybe doing, starting to do some early technical assistance, or not technical assistance, but trainings to get people ready, starting in December. And in January, we'll definitely be hitting the ground running on a lot of these. This will come in a format of webinars that will be recorded, that will be posted, tools to help people start thinking about how to get ready for the process, what is BEAD, and there'll be different kinds of modules that, again, we're going to make sure that people are aware. We're going to pump them out through all our channels, and we're just to make sure, because this is such a rapid program, that we want to make sure that people are as prepared as possible. So that is that's it really for the presentation. Just want to note that after the grants are made, we're looking at deployment likely in late 2025, early 26, depending on how quickly we get our final proposal back, enter into those grant agreements, and that's when we can start seeing some deployment on the ground, which I think is what everybody's aiming for and excited about. That is all I have for today. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Maria, for that great overview and for all the partnership. I think all of these resources have stimulated more applications too in the region. Last year, we had 7 CASF applications and more than 30 FFA applications. So this is a big sea change for us, as you noted from prior years. So I think what you've mentioned too is the sequencing. The federal funding account is starting to roll out the 77 million. That is going to be a big infusion for us. It does answer one of the questions in the chat about any projects in Yuba County. Yes, there will be 2 projects that AT&T will be working on for the county. And then the goal is to get us continuing in the cycle with, you mentioned there's still some, well, the CASF will open up sometime next year. They will be getting ready for BEAD. And then could you address the federal funding account? Because there were allocations for each county, but in some of the areas, there's still a balance, how that process will work next year.
Yeah, so think about it as so we have the almost 2 billion, and then we have counties allocation. So we know how much each county is more or less allocated from that bucket. And because this has always been imagined as a multi-year program, think about each round of an application cycle helping feed that allocation bucket. So it's not like in this first application cycle, each bucket will get filled because we don't have enough appropriations for that. That's not what we're appropriated to. The last of our funding will come in 2027, actually, according to the legislature. So just if we got 484 proposals for funding in this bucket for federal funding account, requesting almost $6 billion just this first round. And so as choices had, we wanted to be able to projects are evaluated against the scoring rubric, feasibility, objections, how they align with the program goals, and funding availability. So there's a lot of categories that we're evaluating projects against. And so not every project's going to move forward, but that doesn't mean it's the end of the story. And it, of course, there are other programs that we would either, applications that don't get funded this round. Doesn't mean it's the end of the road. There's BEAD. We really want to focus people in on BEAD because this is a once in a lifetime federal opportunity. That money is not going to come again from the feds likely. And so we really want to get people excited and ready for that. And then of course there's CAFF, and then the next round of FFA. I can't tell you when that round is. We're not sure. We just want to finish out this first round, which, like I said, it'll be like into Q1. We will be making investments or recommendations and awards into Q1. So as over the lifetime of the program, the idea is that we'll get up to each county's allocation over the lifetime of the program.
Well, that's good to know, Maria. That was one of the questions some of our regions had. Another question that we had was, will all of the funds be available? Will any of the funds be available for non-fiber projects? And that's an ongoing issue, especially in the Delta, where it's hard because of the geography.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Absolutely. The BEAD program allows for a variety of funding. And again, that's a once in a lifetime investment from the feds that we should all be ready for. And so that allows for fiber, wireless technology, even some limited satellite. I think their preference for the most part is to deploy as much fiber and other reliable technology as possible first. But yes, and then certainly, of course, it's available through the California Advanced Services Fund as well. So there's plenty of space in these programs for non-fiber deployments.
Great. And I want to note too, Maria, what you mentioned about the bead mapping. So each program has kind of different mapping and different requirements. So that's our job, is to help our communities and our providers kind of navigate those different areas where we identify what eligible projects would be, right?
I'm sorry, I don't think I caught the question. Say that again.
It wasn't really a question. It was more of a statement that you mentioned about the mapping for beads. So each program has kind of a different mapping process and how they identify eligible households or areas, locations. So that's our job, is to help kind of the communities be ready and see that data match to their priorities.
And that's such a valuable advisement or valuable kind of support that you can provide applicants and communities in thinking about this, because the fact is that these programs all have different origins. So one is governed by the federal government and they've set the standards. Another one is set in statute, you know, and so they all have different limitations and requirements. And it's so important to have consortia that can help advise and, you know, help folks understand those nuances.
And we appreciate all the support we get to navigate all of these. And one last question, and then we'll move on. But Eduardo Gonzalez, our colleague from Fresno, asked about has the January 1st, 2025 adoption account cycle been canceled?
Yeah, so we issued a letter, the CPUC issued a letter earlier this year, putting on hold this last July's cycle. Part of that is because we really wanted to be able to get through the award process for FFA. So we didn't want to confuse applicants, right, out there in the world as are we getting our FFA award that we got? Should I like apply? I can't tell. And so we wanted to be able to move through that process and get that funding out the door, and really then be able to step back and look at the space and then allow a sequence for applicants that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. And one last question.
I can't tell you about the July 2021 yet, but rest assured that we are planning on certainly having a next round for CSF. So stay tuned.
One last question we received. Is it expected that the second round of FFA funding will be open for new applications or revisit previously received applications that weren't funded in round one?
That's a great question. So I think from a practical perspective, and if I'm an ISP or a community that's put together an application, you know, I put my application in last year in 2023. And so whenever the next round of applications are due, one, we will have made a lot of investments at that time, so the environment could have changed. And so I would want to likely take that application, maybe refresh it a little bit to see, do the locations still make sense? Does my plan still make sense with how I've designed this based on the new environment? And certainly we would encourage people, absolutely, if they didn't get funded this round, if they want to come back again with, you know, a refreshed look, they should definitely do that. The portal is wonderful because once you create a profile in there and you can, you know, continue to work on your applications, on new applications within the portal. And again, don't fall asleep on BEAD. Like those applications could also possibly, if you're looking at locations that make sense and those also qualify for BEAD, I would certainly try to take advantage of that first, like spend our federal money first if we can.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I know that you are always available to us. We appreciate your responsiveness and your support, and thank you for joining us today.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
All right, take care. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to our very own Navreed Handal and Deb Collars, who are going to talk about our new business broadband resource section. And then after that, they'll be followed by Roland Oak, who's going to talk about the model permitting materials that SCAG has developed in partnership with SANDAG and California Emerging Technology Fund. And this is all about getting us ready. You can tell from what Maria's talked about, next year is going to be a very busy year. Lots of new projects coming. You'll hear from many providers that are investing in the region in addition to these federal and state funding accounts. So we need to be ready, and that means getting ourselves prepared with resources and permit streamlining. So I'm going to turn it over to Deb and Navreet, who will give us an overview of the report that we just completed.
Thanks, Trish. And hello, everyone. I'm Deb Collars. I'm a consultant with Valley Vision, and I helped work on the Broadband for Business project. I'm seeing a lot of faces here of people who were very helpful on this project. And just on behalf of Valley Vision, wanted to say thank you to all of you for your inputs and contributions. So by way of background, Valley Vision received a grant from the U.S. Economic Development Administration to study broadband conditions in our region for businesses. And I have to say it was a novel assignment. As Trish noted earlier, much of the ways we talk about and analyze broadband has to do with residences and locations. And this was an opportunity to look much more closely at our businesses. That's not to say businesses haven't been studied in a number of studies in our region. For example, there are sections on businesses, and we leaned on the existing research and then added to it ourselves. Next slide, please. The research for this project was particularly focused on the types of businesses you see here, smaller businesses, women and minority owned, our commercial corridors, and rural and agriculture. And there were some good reasons for this. Generally, larger businesses tend to have the resources they need, full-on IT departments and so forth. And so they tend to have their broadband and internet needs buttoned down. I'm not saying it's perfect for everyone, but Valley Vision really wanted to take a deeper dive on smaller, less resourced businesses, and the EDA supported this approach. Another key reason for doing this research was what we learned and saw during the pandemic when businesses had to pivot to online operations, and that was not always easy for a number of these businesses. And so that led to kind of a bottom line question for us, which is, how can we build resiliency in the face of disasters and also in the face of economic shocks? Next slide, please. Our final report has 3 sections, and we'll get you a link in the chat to the report. Those sections are listed here on the slide. A key area was our mapping work, which took some new approaches, and Navreet is going to talk about that in just a second. We worked on a survey, and many of you helped us get that survey out to businesses. We thank you for that. We did the classic literature reviews and research and so forth. And perhaps most meaningful, we spent time interviewing business people personally and documenting their stories and their voices and their challenges. And you can find these case studies and voices throughout the report. And they were quite eye-opening. And I will leave it to all of you to get to know those. Next. Oh, and finally, we prepared a toolkit with resources and strategies that we hope folks will take a look at. It's self-explanatory in the report. The next slide, please. These were the key findings of our report. I won't read through all of them, but I just want to say I thought the most interesting finding was just how much of the need is hidden. And there's a couple reasons for this. Business people are just busy people, and they don't even have time to complain. And they're also overwhelmed with the pressures of running their businesses. They may not have time to hire consultants or invest in solutions. Sometimes the owners are older, or they have limited English speaking skills, or other challenges that make it hard to tap into technology. And Finally, we saw that groups that traditionally serve businesses like chambers of commerce, property and business improvement districts, and so forth, they themselves are balancing other priorities like vandalism and crime and security and so forth. So it's not easy, and we hope to continue to help figure this out, working with these groups. Next slide, please. Our mapping was kind of a hallmark of this work, and I'd like to have Navreet, who was our mapper in chief on this project, explain the kind of novel work we did on this project.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Deb. So going into the maps as part of our analysis for broadband conditions within our region, Valley Vision developed maps not only for our local government jurisdictions, but for our 18 property business improvement districts as well that are located within the city and county of Sacramento. And so in doing so, these maps are able to provide that detailed analysis of broadband in our key economic corridors. That's really allows us to offer this business needs oriented lens for this report. And so the maps are developed with two key data sets. One is being zoning, and the zoning data set is from the California State Geoportal, and it's the zoning data set that's developed by the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. And so from that zoning data source, we went ahead and aggregated the data set even further to provide zoning for three key locations, being commercial, agricultural, industrial, as these are the three zoning areas that are business oriented and will allow our maps to kind of hone in and focus on that and highlight business needs as well. The second aspect of our map, and the most important, was the broadband availability. And so this was developed using the California Public Utilities Commission's federal funding account interactive map. And so in using this map, we decided to use this map for several reasons. One being that the federal funding account provided the most up-to-date data set for the state of California. And so it was really key for our regions when assessing the broadband conditions to have the most updated data set. Not only that, but the broadband data set itself pretty much determined the unserved locations within its map to be those that lack that wireline access at that 25.3 threshold. And so that is the minimum threshold that's been determined in order to provide the speeds needed for businesses, residents to have the proper broadband access. And as well as this does kind of aggregate out old technology or legacy tech. And so it allows us to have a key insight on what locations have the most recent or the most up-to-date broadband kind of infrastructure, as well as the most bare minimum speeds needed in order to run a business or be in residence. So from there, I'm providing several examples of maps that we've created. And so one thing that's important to note when it comes to unserved locations, and these are kind of the three levels at which we develop them, one being Sacramento County or at the 4 county levels, one being the city of Galt to kind of include the approximately 11 city maps that we've developed, and then one being for the River District Property Business Improvement District. So of that, there's 18 total. And so for these maps itself, as you can note by the hexagons represent the mass market unserved locations from the federal funding account map. But it is very important to note that these hexagons itself are not based on population density or the density of locations that are there. It's more so focused on scale. So each hexagon itself represents 1/10 of a kilometer. And so when we look at various unserved locations, it's important to note that these unserved locations, no matter how many locations it denotes, whether it's 1 to 2 or even more to 10, it's important to recognize these in the context of the location they're in. So for a more densely packed city where there would be multiple locations throughout, it's important to recognize kind of higher density. But for more agricultural areas that are less, that are more sparse, having just something as simple as the lighter color being 1 to 2 locations can show that that area does not receive the needed broadband availability, given that there already is 1 to 2 locations. And so rather than it being kind of a percentage of, 10% of locations within this area or within this hexagon are unserved. It is just an amount, but we don't know necessarily what the total amount of locations are. And so this mapping does kind of allow us to interpret what the density is for these locations. And I'll pass it back over to Deb.
Thank you, Navreet. And we stand ready and available if people have questions, down the road as you're looking at these maps. We hope that individual groups will find them helpful in better understanding your own areas. We had so many partners on this project, and there you can see them listed here. There are full accounting of who we interacted with in the report itself. And I think Trish and the Valley Vision team will join me in saying thank you on this project. And we are happy to answer questions. Just reach out to us anytime.
Thank you so much, Deb and DeVries. So as Deb said, we're here for you. There's a lot of resource materials in there, and it's geared to different partners, it's jurisdictions, it's workforce board folks, it's people that work with all the businesses directly, it's the farm bureaus and others. It's a big issue for us, especially making sure that our rural areas are connected. By the way, we work with our Sacramento Area Council of Government to lift those needs for the infrastructure that farmers and rural communities need to be able to compete. So with that, I'm going to thank Navreet and Deb again and turn it over to Roland Oak, our colleague from Southern California Association of Governments, and he's going to talk about his work to help us get ready for big infrastructure investments.
Hi there. Can everyone hear me?
A little faint.
A little faint. How about now?
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Can you pull the PowerPoint presentation?
The presentation showing right now for everyone?
No.
I'm seeing
Yes.
the previous one.
No. Okay. Apologies. I seem to have had it up on my screen, but it wasn't showing up on everyone else's. Is it showing now?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So many of you have probably met me and know a lot about this project, but for those who haven't, happy to give an overview on the Broadband Permit Streamline Report and Model Ordinance. My name is Roland Oak. I am the Broadband Program Manager here at SCAG. Next slide, please. Great. So, SCAG's been actively involved in broadband initiatives since the onset of COVID-19. We have been, not just SCAG, but SANDAG or San Diego Association of Governments, our sister agency as well, have been involved in bridging the digital divide. At the behest of our stakeholders, both SCAG and SANDAG were tasked with addressing permitting issues, with SCAG leading the project management for the report and ordinance, while SANDAG spearheaded the outreach efforts. This includes coordination, hosting workshops, collaborating with local jurisdictions. So essentially, this is a collaborative effort between both agencies, supported by all stakeholders involved in broadband. Now, this was initially kind of SoCal oriented, but honestly, this is more of something that affects the entire state, if not parts of the nation or the whole nation as a whole. So to start, in 2022, SANDAG launched what's called the Regional Digital Infrastructure Task Force, also known as REDIT, and it consisted of RVCs, staff from local jurisdictions, planning, public works, ISPs, and so forth. And then in August, after that, we formally kicked off we hired a consultant and formally kicked off our report and ordinance ourselves. Also in 2022, California released the local permitting playbook. And next slide, please. So initially we thought this was going to be redundant, and so we were scratching our heads and thinking, cancel our project given that the state is working on this. But what we found was that, after reading the playbook, it is extremely high level and lacks, I wouldn't say lack, but needed more of a focused approach for specific local jurisdictional needs. So rather than it being redundant, the playbook actually served as an important foundation. So we ensured that our project aligned and complements the playbook's recommendation. So some of the key, high-level recommendations from the playbook was, the increase in transparency, implementation of online permitting portals, exploring the use of kind of like micro trenching, or consider using batch permitting, increase in staffing, and of course, develop a local ordinance itself. Next slide, please. So here are some of the findings. We again mentioned earlier we spoke with local jurisdictions, staff from other departments, and ISPs and so forth. And we found that we identified several core pain points. So there is a lack of broadband policy, lack of recognition in general plans. They don't have any digital plan or no relevant ordinance in place. We also found that timelines varied across, the region, if not the state. It's important to note that, especially with, I believe, wireless communications towers, once a project is moving forward, the FCC has what's called a shot clock mandate, which means that you're supposed to issue out a permit within the first 60 days. However, we found that those who are providing permitting can do it as quick as 2 weeks, while others take several months or even years. And the FCC is not like this super huge, department, kind of like the FBI or DEA or whatnot, right? So they can't go everywhere and ding local jurisdictions on not providing, sufficient permitting in a sufficient manner, which then leads to, there's clearly inefficient staffing or insufficient staffing to handle the volume and complexity of permits. There's also ambiguity amongst permitting costs. There's a lack of a clear fee structure. Sometimes cities add like beautification fees or street repair fees, which adds to the permit process. And a lot of ISPs are kind of scratching their head. Why is your neighboring city 50% cheaper than your city? We just don't understand. Next slide, please. So, after identifying the pain points, the group, proposed, some recommendations. Well, we clearly need to enhance transparency, clearly identify and communicating what the permit fees are. There is a need to train staff to effectively implement and enforce broadband ordinances. They do need a streamlined permitting method. They should consider the use of batch permitting to process multiple permits, and introduce guided applications such as checklists or flowcharts. One of the biggest, another concern that I forgot to mention was that there seemed to be a lack of ownership, or every city does it differently. One city the planning department will handle it. Another city, the public works department will handle it. Whereas another city, the city manager's department will handle it. And in other cases, no one knows. So it'll go from city manager, they'll kick it off to planning goes, I don't think we do this, they'll kick it off to public works, and it just causes a lot of pain and confusion for both parties. Ultimately, both our identified pain points and solutions were consistent with CDT's state playbook. Next slide, please. So we then followed up with a survey across, both regions regarding the permitting process. It was sent to all local jurisdictions, so that's like 214 plus local jurisdictions. We did experience COVID survey burnout, so the response rate was low. But whoever did respond, again, what we found was that the pain points were consistent with the state and our workshop findings. Next slide, please. We then followed up with interviews with the following local jurisdictions, with the SCAG and SANDAG local jurisdictions, LA, San Diego, and it's a mix of, huge cities and small cities, including counties, with respect to unincorporated land. So city of LA, really big city, San Diego, really big city, Bell and Bell Gardens, both disadvantaged and really small. City of Oceanside, relatively upscale, county of LA, county of San Diego, and a county of Orange. Next slides, please. Again, findings were consistent with what we had already found with Reddit and so forth. Interesting thing was most of the jurisdictions were just unaware of the FCC shot clock requirements. So clearly the information is not trickling down. And even if but there is a possibility that they did know, but know that the FCC is not really enforcing it. So they just kind of gloss over it or ignore it. We also did find that several jurisdictions do in fact have an online portal system. City of LA showed that they were the most efficient. They achieved review times ranging from 24 hours to 2 weeks. However, there is a backlog. So once it hits the system and staff member is able to get to it, then it goes quick. But getting that staff member to actually go through that system and kind of check all the permits, that takes a little time. So in actuality, while the review time is around 24 hours to 2 weeks, it could be up to 3 months, right? So this is, even though LA has a massive planning department, I'm talking about 150, possibly 200 people, because they're doing so many other things, there's still a backlog that's being developed. LA County, kind of the golden standard. In fact, our digital divide group and for both SCAG and SANDAG, including some of our work efforts, were modeled after LA County. And they were ahead of the curve. They, in fact, developed the wireless communications ordinance. Reason being is one of their big goals is to provide a public access network free of charge to disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. We then interviewed with ISPs and infrastructure developers. They were anonymized. SCAG did not participate in it. We just had our consultant do it because we wanted candid responses. Of course, they were sanitized in our report, so we're not quite sure how heated the discussion was. But ultimately, what we found was that they need established guidelines. Like they need a flow chart. They need someone with dedicated expertise. They need defined checklists. They need defined and clear-cut standards, possibly micro-trenching standards, automation, and so forth. Please. After all of that, we started, developing the permit streamlining report itself. So, we wanted the report and the ordinance to be grounded in reality. Again, no CEQA reform. You're not going to get around, any endangered species act or any other environmental act. This is just, you're going to have to deal with it. And so it builds in constraints because, again, that's what's going to happen when this goes down. Our initial goal and vision was a report and universal ordinance that solves all problems, right? The silver bullet or silver arrow. However, with the development of both the ordinance and the report, we found that the ordinance would be of varying value because some cities have, something great in place, whereas others have nothing. So ultimately, larger cities have a good system, but their issues are more of a internal bureaucratic issue or staffing issue, which can't be really resolved in a report or the ordinance, although we do, of course, recommend that they kind of work internally to fix that. But smaller cities would actually benefit the most, as many do not have a form of ordinance. The reality is most of the cities in the state are less than 100,000 people, which we, at least at SCAG, as a regional planner, consider a pretty small city. Next, please. So the report identifies 10 core problems. I'll just briefly highlight a few key issues to save some time. inconsistent permitting fees, which I mentioned before. There's a lack of uniformity with respect to permitting fees across neighboring jurisdictions. So there's significant disparities where one jurisdiction's fees are much higher than another's. Extra costs I mentioned earlier, road repair, beautification, those complicate the process. So it pretty much leads to back and forth negotiations between ISPs and local jurisdictions over responsibility for these charges. Staffing shortages, the need for improved mapping, right? No one's quite clear as to where the broadband conduit is or should be, mostly on the city side. So it's they're always kind of scratching their heads, like, okay, we're gonna, you want us to issue out this permit, but we don't even know what's existing, so to begin with. So, there's again a lot of back and forth discussion. The necessity for an online portal, or rather a lack of an online portal, and again, the most obvious, a lack of an ordinance itself. Next slide, please. So the report, we of course highlighted all the problems, but that's not enough. We had to then identify best practices or develop best practices. So the report suggests several best practices which can help solve or mitigate these issues. Design standards for microtrenching being one of them. The consideration of using aerial fiber. It is a much cheaper and faster way to expand broadband by utilizing existing power lines where you could shoot or add extra cables for broadband services. That's probably the quickest form. Considering the formation of a JPA to share resources such as hiring staff or consultant to streamline efforts. Also, you might want to consider leveraging, COGS, Council of Governments, as a central authority to issue permits within the sub-region. This probably applies more to, I guess, the SoCal region. At least that's my assumption, because we have so many cities, and we have a lot of COGS. So, and those COGS are also run by elected officials within neighboring cities or cities that are represented by their COGS. So in terms of like ceding authority, I know that's a big issue. We think it shouldn't be that much of an issue because each individual city, or at least the electeds, would still have a say as to how this would go down. The solutions are, of course, not applicable to every situation, so it's important to choose the best practices that aligns with your specific needs. Next slide, please. After all of that, after finding the pain points, developing some high-level solutions, we then developed the model ordinance itself. So it's designed to be a template, but those with an existing ordinance, we still highly encourage you to pick and choose additional language which may fit their needs. The way I see it is, if it still saves 2 weeks of time, that's still time saved. So assuming it's not a huge issue, go for it. What we also and the ordinance itself, solve the bulk of the core problems that were identified in the report. However, 3 issues couldn't be resolved. These are universal fees. We try to come up with like an average fee that might be suitable, across the region. It proved to be an extremely difficult challenge. So this requires a deeper dive later, because we need to actually kind of look into local jurisdiction finances. So it's very hard to determine an actual dollar amount. But at the very least, there should be a consideration of reducing extra fees. An increase in coordination efforts internally or externally with ISPs. Can't really resolve this in the ordinance. This is kind of staff driven, but again, highly recommended solution. Going back to transparency, GIS mapping, this is also driven at the staff level, and it's also a resource need. So if there's constraints, ordinance can't solve it. However, there's definitely a clear need for better data. The ordinance itself is broken out into 3 chapters, so it touches upon traditional wireless, small wireless facilities in the public right of way, underground and aerial fiber development. Next slide, please. So back to the core problems resolved by the ordinance. These are more specific examples. First, the ordinance itself, it clearly outlines a streamlined admin review process, some language regarding the exclusion of extra fees, language regarding batch permitting, and the ordinance file itself. And when you look at it, it just looks like a standard ordinance, so it's hard to tell what exactly has been resolved. So when you click on the PDF, it'll take you directly to the improved language. Next slide, please. We've also added like an appendix. It's not really supposed to be in the ordinance, but kind of like the report adds kind of examples of design standards and samples. Schematics for a wireless. Step 1, you go here, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and so forth. And on top of that, here's all the paperwork you need. You can talk to, city staff. ISPs can talk to city staff, or vice versa. Hey, do you have this? Yes, we have this. Do you have that? Yes, we have that. Cool, 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 cool. Boom. Here's your permit. Next slide, please. Again, mentioned previously that was designed to be flexible. Again, ordinance might be of mixed value. Some might not need it as much, others will. However, we did notice, and what's interesting is that, during I guess the drafting of both the report and ordinance, and during the review process, we found that some local jurisdictions have been using our draft as a template, or at the very least considering using some of the language. So to include City of San Diego, I believe they flat out said, no, we use yours even though it's in draft format, as the foundation of ours. City of Moorpark is also considering it, and I believe County of Santa Barbara are considering the use of some language. So we're actually seeing proof that the ordinance is actually implementable. Next slide, please. So now that the project is complete, we do have a list of next steps. We are continuing to doing marketing. We are developing partnerships for distributions. We want to engage in nonprofits, RBCs, state and federal agencies to extend our reach. We have been communicating with the CDT. It'd be great if they could feature our report and ordinance on their website. Maybe the front page of their Broadband for All website. We also want to go outside of the state and consider kind of pitching it at a nationwide scale. So we'd like to discuss with the FCC and NTIA as to how we can, push this document out to other states so they can use it as a guiding tool for their respective local jurisdiction. I'm already doing it, but we want to promote through panels, webinars, and seminars just like today, possibly roundtable participation. And finally, we want to do at SCAG we do what's called Toolbox Tuesday. So what a Toolbox Tuesday is we bring in local jurisdictions who have executed things like our template or enacted some of the policies that we've recommended. And then we invite other cities or other groups to kind of listen in if they are interested and they'd like to know more as to how it went down. So next slide. That's it. Yeah. So thank you all for listening. You can go to our website, scag.ca.gov broadband, or you can contact me directly via email or phone if you have any more questions.
Roland, thank you so much. And we are going to put it on our website and get it out. And I think maybe later down the road when we get into some of the implementation work, and also we've talked with our Council of Governments that I think we'd love opportunities to keep collaborating with you on the deployment because it's so incredibly rich. we need to get on to our next panel members, but if anybody has questions directly now for you, Roland, I'd suggest if they can put it in the chat, and then we'll follow up too, and we'll keep working with you through the networks and getting the word out, and just really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, Roland. And, you know, we just need all these deployment tools so we can activate the infrastructure investment. And I'm very pleased to introduce our next panel members, Mark Allen and Mayank Gul from Zayo Group. We had a great presentation with them through the California Emerging Technology Fund, and also an individual meeting where they talked about all their projects on middle mile infrastructure deployment. A fantastic partner. There's a lot of opportunities throughout our region, and so I'm going to turn it over to them now. Thank you very much, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Trish, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So I'll give a quick introduction to myself. My name is Mark. I am located in Denver, just a few blocks away from our headquarters here in Colorado. And I've been at Zayo for over 5 years. I'm currently leading our government programs, both related to middle mile expansion through NTIA and other municipal fiber grants, but also leading our go-to-market campaign with enabling last mile carriers for some of the activities that they might be doing in California related to BEAD or FFA. And you can go to the next slide, please. I want to start out with this slide just to highlight that Zayo is the largest private open access dark fiber network operator. I know there's a lot of words in North America. And I do want to again reiterate open access. We are not a last mile carrier. And again, really our approach to BEAD funding and funding within California is to be an enabler for our government partners and our carrier customers to ensure that they are provided with low-cost backhaul and middle mile services, to ensure that their applications, their end users are all benefiting from that, that low-cost benefit that we're able to provide with some of our partners in the federal government. The next slide, please. So before we jump into some of our other maps, one thing I want to highlight is Zayo's unique architecture that we're calling the Digital Equity Access Network. The way I always explain this is the way that I speak about with my friends and family, which is historically, Zayo was built through acquisitions, but our bread and butter is building that long haul network that traditionally connects metro areas and data centers. And I like to think about that as a toll lane. But that toll lane cannot serve the rural communities that it passes through. And so with both the NTIA funding and some creative implementation internally at Zayo, we are installing the Digital Equity Access Network along our NTIA grants and also intermittently where there is an opportunity on our existing or new network where it might support last mile carriers. And the big difference between what you're seeing on the screen here and what you might have experienced previously with Zayo over the course of the last 20 years is that we're actually dedicating an entire ribbon or 12 fibers as a packet network along our middle mile routes. And that both provides a low cost access to our network, but it also allows for intermediate access points along the network. So back to the highway analogy, instead of building a toll lane, we're really building a true highway system where there's exit and on-ramps adjacent to the fiber routes that we are building. And there's a few benefits to this. Two that I'll highlight are the competitive rate cards. Zayo is sometimes referred to as the carrier of carriers. We have nearly 900 last mile carrier customers. And through this, with our middle mile grants and elsewhere, we are standardizing that lit service product set to ensure that metro pricing is equitable to rural areas. So as we all know, it's probably a lot more expensive to have fiber access or packet services in rural California than it might be in the Bay Area. And what we're trying to do is bridge that gap and provide the equity so that those carriers serving those underserved communities are actually being provided rates and low cost that they can then pass on to their customers. And this remains to be an open access network, which is something that's been inherent to Zayo for a long time now. meaning we're willing to work with anyone who's willing to serve their own communities. And next slide, please. Here is our commonly known as UPR route, which is Umatilla to Prineville to Reno. And there are 3 counties here in Northern California. 2 of them are Sierra and Maddox. And I'm actually forgetting the third right now, I apologize. But this is a route where we were provided NTIA funding. Zayo was awarded 3 NTIA awards, around $93 million in funding. We were the only national carrier to be awarded NTIA middle mile grant awards. And again, this route will deploy that DEAN architecture that we showed on the last slide, where we intend to provide that intermediate access for lit services along the route. And there are some cities on the bottom there within California that we mentioned: Altura, Spanish Springs, and Erlong. And next slide, please. This is a more of a zoomed out view of our network along the West Coast, particularly in California. I'll just pause here for a moment too, so everyone can get their eyeballs and squint a little bit at the arrow that I pointed at the UPR route. I apologize for the small image. But really the intent here is to show that some of the opportunities that I hope to come out of this meeting and any future meetings will not just be along that UPR route where that DEAN architecture is deployed, but also elsewhere in our network. Again, Zayo is going to approach BEAD funding and other state and federal funds as an enabler to last mile carriers and local governments. And so the conversations that we are having today and hope to have are largely around how can we support you on your grant applications from both an infrastructure side and a soft touch grant application side, being that today under my team, we have roughly $300 million in state, local, and federal grants. So I would like to think that we have created some of that expertise internally, and we hope to share that with some local carriers or governments that might not be as fluent in what tends to be somewhat complex environment, and how can we best support them and their needs, knowing that it is different across different organizations. And I apologize if I'm going a little fast here. I do have a hard cutoff here at 2:30. That's EST time, but that would be at the end of the half hour for everyone else. And so last slide here is Zayo is your partner in connecting what's next. And again, I think about our approach to supporting government-funded fiber networks in 2 different ways. First is that infrastructure side, where we're willing to have conversations where we pull up network maps and we creatively think of where could we potentially do joint builds, where could some of our partners access our existing network, or where could Zayo build new middle mile networks to support those last mile or again municipalities in areas that are today underserved. The other side of that is Zayo has around 860 carrier customers today. And so I'm leading the go-to-market campaign around reaching out to both the carriers and the local municipalities to ensure that they're aware of this opportunity with Zayo. And again, willing to be their partner on grant applications, or outside of that, just general support for those underserved communities and ensuring that they have backhaul and middle mile where they might not otherwise prior to the new world we live in with government funding to rural areas. I'm happy to stay over for a few more minutes if there's any questions. If not, I will also share my email in the chat link here, and anyone's welcome to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Mark. And we're going to be following up with you. We've already worked on connecting you with some of our communities, and really want to take to heart people, your offers to help with grant applications and to amplify what the middle mile is coming in through the state. That network is not going to reach all of our areas, so this partnership would be really important. So we're here to help support those connections.
Yeah, thank you, Trish, and really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak today.
Oh, thank you so much. And we'll be in touch. And please, if you have questions, route them to us if Mark gets off. So and now I'd like to introduce Manny Martinez from the city of Sacramento, and Will Morant, the consultant that worked on the local area
Technical Assistance Fund through the PUC to talk about the grant that they received from the federal funding account. And Manny, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Trish. Can everybody hear me? Just want to make sure. All right, perfect. So Manny Martinez, I'm with the City of Sacramento, IT Operations Manager. Been with the city for 35 years. So been there quite a bit, been in a lot of different departments, was there before IT was IT, right? And what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about our conceptual design. However, before that, I want to let everybody know how we got here. So a phrase that I'm going to repeat over and over in the next couple of slides is partnerships, right? Sacramento is a full service city. So we have a public works transportation department, a wastewater utility department, police and fire departments, etc. And 27 years ago, every department had their own networking needs. Now, IT department provides connectivity for all the department's information technology needs. However, both transportation and utility departments have many operational technology needs, or OT needs. Now, OT is a term that they use when they're talking about SCADA networks and such. And so the SCADA networks connect back to some head end or data center that support traffic operations and wastewater operations and such. Now, in terms of partnerships, they also received fundings from the Federal Highway Administration, and our utility department is enterprise funded, so they get funding from water bills and grants. So what the city did years back was we organized a partnership or a group to help build out that network, right? We identified that if each one of us were to build out segments of the network that we needed, it was very costly. But if we pull our resources together, we could share that cost. A trench, a conduit, a cable, and we can go a lot farther. So that partnership allowed the city to grow its fiber network for from a few transportation arterials to what it is now is over 190 miles. And so sheath miles, that is, connecting many of our city's signalized intersections, treatment plants, reservoirs, and city facilities along the way. So that growth of our network from our partnerships took time, and it was very incremental. So our network grew more organically out of the city's needs. Then strategically, we proved extremely beneficial, right? We now partner and have agreements with California Department of Technology, CDT, Sacramento County, County Sheriff's Department, UC Davis, Scenic, Los Rios, Community College, and a lot of others, and help with last mile efforts. But when the pandemic hit, the city witnessed the necessity of broadband. Certain communities had very limited to no wired connectivity at all. This demonstrated the need for the city to develop a more broadband strategic plan in an attempt to leverage our communications networks to directly help the communities. So our strategic plan can be seen more as a roadmap, and it'll help phase in the city's efforts and help focus our funding and connect remaining public facilities, community centers, fire stations, traffic signals, water reservoirs, etc. And with the help of Intrust, our consultant, we laid out a roadmap. Key points here, though, is our network was not built with one massive project, but it was more incrementally constructed as we partnered along the way with other departments and agencies, and we took advantage of funding opportunities as they came along. Next slide, please. So with our broadband strategic plan completed, we became aware of grant opportunities that followed the pandemic, right? The city, like many other cities, wanted to use the momentum of this post-pandemic time to deliver services digitally. However, if there were still communities that lacked reliable and affordable broadband, that would make it difficult, if not impossible, to provide those services. So then we became aware of the last mile grant opportunity, and it was perfect timing. The city was able to produce a high-level design based on maps and address lookups and broadband data from the FCC and CPUC. We quickly recruited engineers to provide data analytics from our GIS team. And we also needed somebody extremely familiar with the city's fiber optic network. So we leveraged one of our key telecom engineers who had a broadband background. We overlaid the communities that were identified by the FCC as unserved or underserved with our existing infrastructure and aligned the community's needs with the city's broadband strategic plan. And that's the map you see that's being displayed now. With the high-level broadband design, we developed a cost estimate from previous projects the city's done. And these cost estimates were used in our grant application. One point to make here is the city knows fiber infrastructure, but we are not a broadband service provider. We advertise and are currently negotiating with the public-private partnership for a service provider. And the goal is simply to deliver modern and affordable broadband services to those communities that need it in the city. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Will Murat with Intrust.
Thanks, Manny. You can flip to the next slide, please. I'm with Intrust. We're a national design engineering, consulting, construction management, project management firm, formerly Magellan. And we started working with Sacramento. I want to say it must have been late 2022 on that strategic plan. And as we saw the city take that plan and turn it into a successful $38 million grant award, I think about some of the things that stood out of why Sacramento has been successful. And one is, they planned ahead, right? So plan now if you haven't already. Sacramento had the plan ahead. They had already identified CIP projects where there were synergies, utility coordination, joint trench, all these opportunities to incrementally build were already in front of their mind, and they were already thinking about them and planning for them. That created a shovel-ready environment for grant opportunities that they were able to say, well, we know how much it's going to cost to build out to that neighborhood because we've already identified a grant. But they also knew that there was multiple benefits there. It wasn't just about connecting, say a city water treatment plant or some other asset that they needed connected. It was about combining that public benefit of improved city communications with reaching the unserved community, creating that affordable high-speed broadband that Manny just talked about. The other thing that stood out to me in working with the city is the level of community engagement. And Manny talked about kind of their partnerships already, but it's not just identifying community needs. That's, for a large part, that ends up being just a data exercise. But understanding those community needs was key. And we saw that throughout the project with the city. Their relationships with their partners, their ability to understand where the needs were and understand what is the need. Is it an infrastructure need? Is it a digital literacy need? Is it an affordability need? Is it a technology need? They really were able to delve into what the particular nuances are and what was driving the community need so that they could better target those grants. That also helps them define the public benefit. If you're talking with other public agencies, public benefit becomes much broader to define that. If you're talking about education facilities, CBOs, community-based organizations, hospitals, those kinds of things. Also, I think, Sacramento demonstrates that you do kind of have to create the capacity and dedicate some resources. But to my mind, and I I'm a bit of an acolyte on this, that 21st century communications means you have to treat it as a 21st century utility. If your community, that includes municipalities, counties, but that also means residents, businesses, stakeholders. If broadband is really a utility, then it has to be treated as such. You need water, you need sewer, you need roads, you need power, and you need broadband to function in this century. Whether it's remote learning, remote work, or simply being able to connect to employment opportunities, it doesn't stop. So Sacramento has been approaching it with that mindset. And the last thing, and I apologize for forgetting her name at the beginning of the session, Mari, I apologize, the CPUC Deputy Director. She talked about this a bit, so I don't want to spend any time on it, but there are a lot of grants out there. The easiest ones really that I see is the CASF grants, because there's such a wide and broad eligibility status there to think about things like she talked about inside wiring for public housing, or adoption funds to help with programming, local programming and digital literacy programs. And the other one that I would just kind of draw everyone's attention to conclude is the EDA has a unique program that does and can fund broadband projects, particularly if you're looking at economic development kind of opportunities. If you have a site that you're trying to redevelop, if there's an area you're trying to attract employers to, if there's an area where you're trying to retain major employment or business, EDA, and I've had personal experience at the city level, really has been a helpful program that can kind of supplement in those areas and say, well, the first step to attracting kind of 21st century businesses is having 21st century communications, and that EDA can come in and help with building out those kind of networks. So I think it's been a privilege to work with Manny and his team and Darren and the city. And I'm a little bit partial because I'm born and raised in Sacramento, but it was a privilege and to watch that success and see how they're building out this network, and that they continue to dedicate the time and resources towards it. And with that, that's about into my comments, Manny.
No, and I just want to thank Trish and everybody else who and all the speakers here. This is a really engaging webinar, and I appreciate all of the talk.
Well, thank you so much, Manny and Will, and it's been great working with you through the whole course of the plan. Really, we're proud to see the city be so proactive and really generate this huge investment and take a holistic approach. And as a Sacramento City resident, I'm very proud too. So we'll look forward to working with you on implementation. And thank you again for all your leadership and giving us a strong foundation to really connect the city. I think people were surprised how many areas of the city, being the state capital, were not really having the kind of connectivity and access that everybody needs and deserves. So okay, thank you so much. Next, I'd like to introduce Alice Perez, our partner and director of external affairs, and Shannon McKiernan from Tech Project Program Manager. And I mentioned earlier in the presentation that AT&T supported our grant process at Layatacha Floyd, and we've also partnered with you on many things, including affordable connectivity programs. So really grateful for your partnership, and love to have you give us a quick overview about what the deployment is going to be for the federal funding account in Yolo and Yuba counties.
Absolutely, Trish. Thank you so much. For AT&T, we're focused on connecting Americans to broadband across the U.S. Particularly for me, I cover 16 counties in Northern California, from Yolo up to the Oregon border and the 80 side of Lake Tahoe. So what we're focused on is improving affordability through our Access AT&T program. In addition to that, encouraging adoption. And the way we do that is by collaborating with local community leaders and organizations to focus on improving digital literacy skills as well as access to devices. And then more importantly for this call is looking at, how do we actually look at expanding access? And that's, pursuing public-private models to efficiently use some of the federal funds that are out there to support the broadband build-outs. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Shannon, and she's going to talk a little bit about the FFA award recommendations for Yuba and Yolo County.
Thanks, Alice. Good afternoon, everyone. So I know we spoke to it a little bit earlier in the call, or it was spoken to, but there are 4 recommendations that we have right now in these areas, 2 in Yolo County, 2 in Yuba County. I'm just going to briefly go over how many unserved locations we have for each location, what we have for FFA awards, and then just kind of general area as well. So for our first Yolo County application, we're looking at that area being around the Woodland area. Let me pull my map up really quick here. Yeah, it's around, we have a section in Woodland. It goes kind of west over to 505, and there's an area in between that. It also goes up 5 to the north a bit. And there's a section up there kind of all the way up to Road 108 and through that area. For that project, we have a total of 1,253 unserved locations, and we're getting grant funding in just the amount of just over $9 million. For our second project in Yolo County, we're looking at 491 unserved locations, about $2.6 million FFA award there. And that project is located along the I-5 corridor, a large portion Dunnigan, a little bit north, and then another larger section south of Dunnigan as well, kind of towards the base of Road 89B and then to the east a bit. Moving to Yuba County, our first project in Yuba covers about 1,853 unserved locations, looking at grant funding in the amount of $10 million for that project. And this Yuba project is, it's kind of scattered. We have some areas kind of around Yuba City, a little bit to the south, towards Plumas Lake, to the east a bit, kind of to the southeast of Beale Air Force Base, and then up to the north around Loma Rica, and then Browns Valley, a little section in Browns Valley to the south, right on Highway 20. Our last project in Yuba County has 646 unserved locations as part of it. We received grant fund, or were recommended grant funding in the amount of $2.4 million, and that is one large section, kind of towards Oregon House, but a little bit to the east of that, moving north towards Frenchtown, and then a little bit south as well, just above Dixon Hill. So that's just a quick overview. Any questions on those 4 projects?
The other thing is, one thing I do want to point out is that AT&T, as we're looking at these projects, we're also making very equal amount of investment ourselves from AT&T's funding. So we're utilizing the matching funding from the grants as well as utilizing our funding to provide these services.
Yeah, thank you, Alice and Shannon. And I do want to let people know that when you go to the PUC resolutions, there's all the detail is in there about the maps and the specific areas. And we're really excited because we've been working with AT&T for years. Looking at maps, looking where your middle mile is, and these have been all high priority areas for us. And we've got several partners on the call from the 2 counties that we've been working with over the years. So it's great to see. I'm sure the resolution will be approved for these investments. And I see, look, in Winters, the school district is saying we're excited. So really can begin to see the opportunity for us to get these investments. And any support you need, from the local communities, of course. We're all here to make this happen.
Appreciate that.
I'll
Thank
drop
you.
my contact information
Okay.
in the chat as well. So if anyone
Great.
wants to follow up with me, I will. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And we still have a lot of deployment we need to do across the region. So working with you and all the other providers to get projects in the pipeline for the next round of these funding pieces that are coming up. So let's see. Yeah, there's so it's an interesting comment here, little island of exclusion. So still some areas to cover. And Collins Lake Road. Well, the other thing I think you can see from the description, Shannon, is how diffused the locations are. This is a challenge in reaching rural areas and for that higher cost solution. So little by little, we're trying to get everybody.
Make sure everything else
Yep.
goes along.
Okay, thank you, Alice, as always, and thank you, Shannon.
Thanks.
Okay, next we're going to introduce Mark Peterson from unWired Technology. We've been working with Mark to cover especially some of the communities in the south part of our consortium area, and again, see all those challenges of trying to deploy, but really happy to introduce Mark and talk about some new opportunities to connect with some of our hard to reach areas. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Trish, and thanks for all the work that you do and Valley Vision does, and helping bridge the digital divide. If you're unfamiliar with unwired broadband, if we can get the first slide up. We've been operating in California since 2005. We're headquartered in Fresno, California. We began by serving rural areas outside of Fresno in the agricultural communities. Our mission historically has been to serve the underserved and unserved communities of California. We started out as a fixed wireless provider. Today we have over 200 vertical assets that we transmit our connections from, but we're also a fiber provider now as well, so you could consider us a hybrid carrier. We've recently completed our first citywide project in Coalinga, California. We have 2 other citywide fiber projects underway in Parlier and in Fowler, California. So when all those 3 projects are completed, those will be another 15,000 California residents that have access to high-speed fiber internet services. We have, is the image up by any chance?
I cannot seem to find the slides on my end. I will extend screen share capability if you could potentially share, if that's all right. Oh, you're unmuted. I am so sorry.
Yeah, he doesn't have the slides, or his laptop, I don't think.
Perfect. I will take one moment to get those up.
No problem. So our network extends from the base of the Tehachapi south of Bakersfield, all the way up north of Sacramento to Red Bluff. And again, we serve the underserved communities in that region. If you're familiar with fixed wireless technology, it was mentioned the other day, this is not your father's fixed wireless network. We have brought in over the last 20 plus years network architects and engineers from the tier 1 carriers. We've built a network for redundancy and reliability. All of our towers are in rings for failover capabilities and redundancy, and it really is a carrier class network that we've expanded. There's also been some new technologies that have been expanded here in the last 3 years. If you're familiar with Tarana Wireless, it's a company that over the last 3 years has really changed fixed wireless technology. They've found a way through their technology to solve issues for line of sight. So we're able to serve non-line of sight areas now that might have been impacted previously by heavy tree coverage, that sort of thing, and delivered at very high speeds. With our Tarana technology, we're able to deliver speeds. In fact, we have plans right now, 100 megs, 200 megs, 400 megs for our residential customers in our Tarana service sectors. About 30% of our network right now of our wireless network, that is served by the Tarana gear. And we're looking at upgrading our entire network to Tarana gear so that everywhere that we do serve our fixed wireless customers, it is with this new technology. Our services as well, because of the way that we manage our network, it's not best effort. It really is a carrier class network where we have service level guarantees. We guarantee speeds. We don't limit data. It's unlimited data. We don't throttle our customers. Recently met with one of our customers who has one of our 100 meg next gen fixed wireless connections. They're operating 3 high HD TVs simultaneously with gaming going on as well. And he works from his home office and frequently uses video conferencing, Zoom, and they're loving it. It's the best technology that they've had. Again, thank you for bringing that up, Narit. So if you go back to the first slide. There we go. That's our coverage area, again, showing from the base of the Tehachapis up to Red Bluff. Those yellow areas is where we have deployed our Tarana equipment. That's that next generation fixed wireless equipment. Those little circles are the sectors served off of each one of our towers where we have Tarana. We've only recently been in the North State in the last couple of years since Tarana equipment was available, and everything we've deployed in the areas around Sacramento and north of Sacramento has been with Tarana gear. You can go to the next slide. This is more specific to the coverage in Sacramento, Yuba, Yolo, and Sutter counties. And that's where we've deployed our Tarana equipment and the coverage that we offer. If you want to go to the next slide. So these are our service plans that we offer. Again, 100 meg, 200 meg, 400 meg plans. Again, with speed guarantees and unlimited data. We did participate in the ACP program, and those discounts would have been available to eligible folks who were hoping and understand that the state might be coming up with something as well for our low-income customers. One of our recent successes, if you want to move to the next slide, or I should say projects that we have underway that we're about to begin, is with the city of Ileton out in the Delta. It was historically been an underserved community. With our legacy older technology fixed wireless, we couldn't serve that customer or that community very well because of the heavy tree coverage. They've got a great riparian canopy there. But we've been working with Councilmember Kent, who I saw was on the webinar earlier, and the community there to set up a tower there within the community. We lease space from the city and expect to have coverage there and service activated later this month. It's a community of about 800 people. We already have 200 people on our waiting list for services. What you see there in that image is by using it's called our CN Heat predictive modeling tool, you can show all the areas that have color in them, or areas that we can get strong signal strength and deliver those 100, 200, and 400 meg connections. So it really covers the city of Ileton and some of the surrounding Delta community there. Everything that we have done to date has been self-funded at unWired. We do have an FFA application that we have for a fiber build out in another city in the Central Valley. Approval of that is certainly pending at the moment. We hope that we're awarded that. But we have been in the last, really since the beginning of the year, with the BEAD coming, reaching out to, I think, 22 different counties, asking them what their plans are, where their gaps are, how we can assist them. And that's one of the messages that I want to offer today is help us help you. We're looking forward to partnering with different jurisdictions where we can bring in the best of class service. There may not be enough funding to do fiber everywhere as part of BEAD, but we're planning on participating in that either with fiber opportunities or with fixed wireless opportunities using our Toronto technology as well. So happy to work with anyone that is looking to help cover all those dots in their communities that are unserved, and seeing if we can provide a solution for you. Again, we're a hybrid carrier. We can match the technology to the mission wherever it might be.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I want to say several of us have been out to your tower sites down near Elk Grove and seen the challenges of deploying in areas like Ileton, and understand what this next generation technology, the Toronto technology, can do to address some of those really systemic and challenging issues like line of sight. So thank you for that, Mark, and we're excited that Ileton's finally going to get some service. Yay. There is a question in the chat from Eduardo about the pricing, because it is $79.99. He said, is that the low cost? How do we deal with pricing issue, for some of our residents?
Right. So again, we did participate in ACP, which would have been a $30 discount off of any plan that we offered. We're constantly looking at our pricing, with grant funding coming that would help us to upgrade our entire network. It may enable us to look at other lower prices down the road.
Thanks, Mark. Well, another area to work, we're doing a lot of work with the California Emerging Technology Fund too on these processes to get price affordability for our residents most in need too. So, but thanks for all. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, everything that we have done today has been self-funded. So to any extent that we can get additional public funding in that will overall lower our costs, that will be terrific.
Well, I think this is the other thing that's on the threshold for us with all of our providers, is looking at partnership opportunities that can help support the cost structures on these projects. So, okay, well, thank you very much, Mark. We're almost at time. I wanted to just quickly note one more project that we had with support through the California Emerging Technology Fund. They support a best practices network for local jurisdictions, and they had some grant funding from T-Mobile that allowed us to work with our communities on kind of best practices. And 4 jurisdictions in our region got funded out of 36 statewide. So that included the cities of Citrus Heights, Ileton, and West Sacramento, and Yuba County. So each applicant or participant will get a $20,000 grant for digital access and inclusion and infrastructure, whatever they choose to work and how to deploy that funding. And that is paired with a digital equity best practices checklist. So it's things that jurisdictions can do to foster infrastructure and adoption across their communities. So that's a resource that we'll have and get out again to everybody. But I wanted to quickly call on our partners who are here to just say a few words about what they're going to use the grants for. So I will start with Councilmember David Kent from Ileton. David, if you could tell us what the city of Ileton is going to use the grant for.
Well, interestingly, the political priority among the community is not more devices. They have devices. And they are extremely appreciative of connectivity because we have a lot of artists and innovative business owners. We're in a historic district. So any of that ability to operate online goes directly to economic prosperity. But what they really want is community engagement in the same way that councils and cities across the state care about community engagement and in public session, access to permitting, access to complaints and public safety concerns. And so really what they're asking for is, can you please make your online services effective for this community? So we've looked at the cost of upgrading our website and more automation and more online availability for the processes that these citizens require, and relative to trying to upgrade our brick and mortar infrastructure for an economically disadvantaged community, this is not only affordable and practical, but mandated. So we're hugely appreciative of the CETF and being able to provide these upgrades for our community.
I'm talking and not getting through. Thank you so much, Councilmember Kent. We're really excited about the opportunity to better connect citizens and that's a value for the community. So happy about that. Now I'll ask John Robinson, the Assistant City Manager for City of West Sac, what they're going to use the funding for. If you're still on, John.
I'm here.
Great.
Yeah, no, we're super grateful to CETF for this opportunity. We are going to partner with the Arthur F. Kerner Library in West Sacramento to provide mobile hotspots to residents. We spoke to them while we were contemplating what to apply for in the grant, and they indicated that the mobile hotspots that they had get rented out frequently. They frequently run out. So this grant will give us the opportunity to triple the number of those that are available in the community and keep them up to date and with data plans for 3 years.
Excellent, John. Thank you so much. And it just, you can see through these couple things and the different ways that the funding will be used. And then the last person I'd like to call on is Ian Scott, our broadband manager for Yolo County.
Thanks, Trish. So here in Yuba, we're still trying to decide the best use of these funds. We'll certainly be doing something in the space of digital equity, but it's a question of whether we would be partnering with a trusted messenger here in our community or doing something on the device side. We just haven't quite figured it out yet.
Nope, that's okay. We've got time. And we're participating in 3 webinars where we're getting updates on things like what Roland presented on best practices, and the community is sharing a lot of great things across the jurisdiction. So we're just about at time where we're a little bit over. We have one last slide, I think, Navreet, to talk about what's next. And there are new funding opportunities. You heard Maria talk a lot about the BEAD application and process coming up. So we're going to be working with everybody to try to get good applications in next year. And then also we wanted to just let you know about the California Digital Equity Plan. There's a capacity grant program through the Department of Technology that is paired with the funding from NTIA for the BEAD to focus on the adoption and access side. So there's going to be a grant period opening up December 6th, and we'll follow up with everyone and get information out about that. And you can only theoretically have one application going in per county. That's encouraged. So we want to make sure that our counties get ready and get applications in. So with that, please email us if you have any questions. Be in touch. We'll look forward to working with you. Here's our contact information. Thank you all for spending your morning with us. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much to all of our speakers as well. So we'll be in touch. We'll send all the materials out. So have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you. Bye.